Zico and I are so excited to talk about World Cup soccer today. Early in the morning on Monday, I got back from doing a tournament in Rapid City. Shout out to Rapid City. Such nice people there. And I'm going to have to call out the Highlands Ranch and the Arvada people. You guys need to clean up your act a bit. And this is what I mean. I had to go to the office in Highlands Ranch last week because last year, our Highlands Ranch people left so much trash on the field that we got complaints. The year before, I hired 4 high school kids to walk the fields and pick up trash, right? And last year I didn't, and we got complaints. And so we're going to have to make sure we clean it up. Now, and one thing that Zico and I do as owners of Kick It 3v3 Soccer is during the tournament, we get trash bags. We hand them out to everybody. Bryce does this. Everybody hands out the trash bags. But one thing I know Zico and I do is we walk around and we pick up trash during the tournament. And I actually had a little girl one time was sitting next to her mom. She might have been 6 or 7 years old. And she said, "Mommy, is he get paid to be the trash man?" Wow. And I said, "Well, yes, I do. Not much, but I get paid to be the trash man." But this is my point. Rapid City, I try to walk around their beautiful facility. I can't find trash. It is so hard to find trash. And they were complaining that there weren't enough trash bins at the fields. I live in Highlands Ranch. I love my Highlands Ranch people and all that, but we got to clean up our act because Rapid City is killing the Denver metro area in general and keeping their soccer fields clean. Not trying to throw shade, but I am throwing a little bit of shade at Denver and not keeping their fields clean. So today what we're going to do, we're so excited. We're going to talk about the first round and a little bit about Canada's. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the Canadian game yesterday because Zico was born in Canada, grew up in Brazil, moved back to Canada, yada, 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 right? What we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about the USA. I'm probably going to talk more about USA than anything. And then Zico is going to review in general the first round, but probably talk about some of the premier teams, what to expect from them in the starting today. And because we got big games today, I think you'd agree with that, Zico. And I'm going to give you, as someone who grew up playing soccer, born in 1967, grew up playing soccer in Kansas City, has seen what soccer's gone through, played college soccer, even got to play with the Kansas City Attack for a couple of months. So as Zico likes to say, I had a cup of coffee as a professional player, just barely. Seen a lot of soccer, season ticket holder for MLS, went to 94 World Cup games. USA Soccer is my favorite team. In fact, my 2 favorite sports teams on the planet are the U.S. men's soccer team. I really don't have a pro soccer team. That's my favorite. And the Kansas City Chiefs because I'm from Kansas City. So love it or hate it, those are my favorite teams. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think we should start off. How does that sound to you, Zico? Does that sound like a good plan, what we're going to chat about today?
Yeah, that's wonderful. If you don't keep us online, we're going to be in trouble, though, because we have opinions and it could last hours and hours. And I've already been biting my nails like crazy. Brazil plays later on today, and I happily would love to talk about it, but I'm going to be biting my nails as I talk about it. So, yeah, just keep us online because we could talk forever about this stuff.
Sure. And you want to give a shout out? Where are you right now? I'm at home. I'm back home in my office after a long trip back from Rapid City where I had a blowout on my car, blah, blah, blah. But not a blowout, a flat tire. I was being a little hyperbolic there. But where are you, Zico? And give a shout out to that coffee shop. Tell me about where you're at and why you're there.
Cool. I'm in Hill City, South Dakota. We love it. We vacation here. We started coming here in 2020. So this is actually our 7th year. And we go swimming in a lake here called Sylvan Lake. We go out and we see the buffalo, everything else. But this coffee shop called Caboose Coffee, I am not a good coffee person. They actually they're one of 2 places that make coffee that I really like. I get an Americano because I guess supposedly Americans could not handle the strength of the Italian coffee or whatever. And so they call it an Americano and it's wimped down a bit or whatever. So I get an Americano and it's Caboose Coffee in Hill City, South Dakota. And they make a great Americano. That's all I know is Americano, and it is really good. That's what I'm saying. Love them.
You're right about that. One of the first times I had coffee, I were some Greek people back, like when I was in my early 20s. And I have Greek family through in-laws. And we were in Cyprus a couple of weeks ago. And my in-laws, they were getting coffee And at the bottom of their coffee, it's sludge. That coffee is so dark, so thick. And I
Wow.
love a rich, bold, dark coffee because something's got to stand up to all the chocolate and frothy stuff I put in it, right? But
Yep.
even if I'm drinking plain coffee, I like dark coffee. This coffee in Cyprus, wait, I'm going to try and drink it, but it is strong. So,
Well,
so you're right.
here's
Asking for an Americano there was important. Go ahead.
here's my last lame joke before we start. Supposedly they say coffee puts hair in your chest, right? Well, it obviously puts hair in your head. And people, as of the last 9 or 10 months, my wife said that I'm balding. So I've been drinking coffee like crazy, and we'll see if I start to look like you with your hair. But I've been drinking coffee like crazy now because I've been told I'm balding. So if it puts hair on your chest, hopefully it does on your head also. We'll see.
There you go, man. All right. Okay. Wearing my USA jersey. Now, I'm proud to say my son, Tyler Stratford, my oldest son is 38, has 3 grandbabies, and 3 of my grandbabies, and one of them on the way. He played for the U.S. Army team when he got out of high school, went to Cherry Creek High School here in Denver area. Then he played for the United States men's national soccer team. So as I got to see him play against Brazil, I got to see him play against the UK, all that stuff. So this is my one. So he gave me one of his jerseys, a little old school USA jersey from that. So I'm very proud of that. Obviously, as a dad, you know what it's like having kids that play soccer. The first thing I want to talk about is the USA men's coach. And in my lifetime, I think I've had one coach where I thought kind of gave us a little bit of a style and a tactic of playing. And I think it was Bradley. I felt like when Bradley was coach, we actually had moments where we had a coordinated attack, I felt, right? But before this team, what you would hear every World Cup is it's all about the set pieces for the USA. It's all about the set pieces because no one believed we could score a goal in the run of play, including most the initiated Americans. But after watching this, I didn't know much about the coach. Hopefully, I'm even saying his name right. Mauricio Roberto Pochettino Trocero. Pochettino Trocero. Hopefully, I'm saying that closer. But it seems to me most of the coaches we've hired in the past, and maybe most World Cup coaches that you hire, are managers, like a baseball manager, like a team manager. They're not going in with an attitude of I'm developing young players, I'm hell-bent on developing a style of play. Rather, they go in, what do we got? How do I put them together? How do we play a style of play that matches the talent that we have? And I get that. I coached high school soccer. It was a similar approach sometimes. And the one year I had 16 kids capable of starting and 11 returning varsity starters, and we won state. That one year, we played a very Brazilian Spanish style of soccer where we possessed the ball from the back because we could, right? And we've been working on that for a couple of years. After reading Mauricio's background, I'm not surprised. I'm still a little surprised that it's working, but I'm not surprised at the style that the U.S. is playing. I chat GP'd him. I said, tell me about Mauricio and the U.S. men's national coach, the style of coach he is, his background. And when we look at it, okay, let's look at where he's coached. Spain, 2009 to 2012. England, 13 to 14. England, 2014 to 2019. France, 21 to 22, England 23 to 24, and now the USA. And of course, he played professionally. I can't remember where he played. He's Argentinian, right? So I think great player. Was obviously a good player. This is my point. So he played at the top level, but not only did he play at the top level, but he was known for developing young players. He was known for coaching an aggressive, you got to be fit to play my style of soccer game. He was known for coaching a building out of the back, like a Spanish team or an Argentinian team or a Brazil team when they're playing the way they want to play a lot of the time. He came in not to manage our players, but to develop a style of play, to teach the players how to play. And I love it. You look at it here, high pressing. His teams play high pressing. Instead of retreating the defense, they immediately pressured the opponent. High energy. He run constantly, defend aggressively, stay physically fit, press for 90 minutes. I'll get back to that defend aggressively here in a bit, because I think that defend aggressively has backfired on us a few times that hopefully we can learn from in the first round of the World Cup. Vertical attacking, quick transitions, direct attacks, getting forward quickly after winning the ball. Love all that. Although I say that it's a little more patient than what ChatGPT described, because I saw our offense oftentimes when we don't have a quick counter, they're being patient. They're working it around the back. The offense is moving, making runs, getting open, that kind of thing. And then you use flexible formation. But the other thing he does is developing young players. And he had a hand in developing players like Harry Kane, Dele Alli, Son Heung-min, Kyle Walker, Luke Shaw, James Ward-Prowse. So I could say, if I were going to prescribe a coach, that would be the coach I would prescribe for the USA men's team if I was optimistic we had the skill to support the style of play that he was coaching. The only thing I wish is that we maybe would have hired him even a year earlier, because that style of play takes a while. But he's built it over the last couple of years, right? So all of that to say, how the type of coach he is and how we're playing, it shouldn't be a surprise, right? How we're playing based on the type of coach he is. We went in, let's talk about those first two games. We went into, oh gosh, remind me, who was the first team we played?
Paraguay.
Blank.
Paraguay.
Yeah, so we played Paraguay. Not a strong team. They played us a little bit low pressure, not packing it in the box, so maybe defended it at third. And in the past, if a team packed it in against us at all, I'm not sure we could figure out how to beat that system, right? Because we weren't quick enough, we weren't creative enough, and all of those types of things. And so we were patient and creative where we needed to be against Paraguay to beat them. We came out of the gate aggressive, just like you would expect one of Mauricio's teams to do. We played possession from the back of our further. This guy back received the ball. His first touch was a productive touch, either to space for him to dribble into, or a quick pass to the keeper, or a quick pass to another player. We rarely whacked the ball down the field, and it was just awesome to see. And that really described our first two games for the most part. Even those own goals we created because of how much pressure we put on the other team in those situations. And you and I both know, Zico, when you're running full speed or towards your own goal, and you're 4 yards in front of your goal, and the cross comes across your body, and you're in the center of the goal, your choice is to let it run through, and then your opponent's going to tap it in, or do everything you can to try and get a foot on it to clear it out. And the problem is you're off balance when that's happening, because you don't everything. And it's not uncommon to tap that kind of ball into your own net. But that's an own goal. That's not a stupid play by the defense, but something that happened because of the pressure that the attacking team put on them. And so I felt like those own goals, we earned as much as you can earn an own goal. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. You put people into difficult situations, right? And they make mistakes, right? And the other thing is the U.S. played up tempo. And what I thought, I did a little video yesterday, what I thought is that the U.S. is playing premiership type speed, in whether that is 10, 15, 20, depends if you're Fahrenheit or Celsius, 10, 15, 20, 40 degrees warmer than what they play in the UK. And you actually hope all 26 players are going to be functional starting at some point, because the U.S. has played this super upbeat pace, which has blown my mind. I'm surprised. I never thought they could do it to this level. And Canada's done a brilliant job of that also. But the U.S. has gotten ahead early in every game. Every game, all three games. The U.S. has gotten a header, which is huge. That's humongous. The other thing is Paraguay didn't pack it in their own box, except that the U.S. packed them in their own box, to be honest. And so I think that when you're playing a superior team, you got to be able to get away from your style. And so far in the first round, the U.S. has been a superior team. And Paraguay, I thought, should have done something differently. Doesn't matter. They were absolutely run over. I thought that the U.S. Now, let me say one more thing about Pochettino, is that he's very eclectic by what you said, and he is. Something that people think about when they watch Argentinians play is that they're so skillful and technical, 100% true. But something they don't realize is that Argentina and Italy are super, super tight in their history. And you know how many Argentinian soccer names that there's one playing right now in the World Cup, a short little number 10 from Argentina, whose last name ends with I, correct? And so even Pochettino, this is a pragmatic Italian background, raised in Argentina. They're very artistic with the ball. But Argentina, if you want to get ugly and hard, There's really nobody harder. And then when you talk about technical, when you list your 25 greatest players ever, 5 of the technical greatest players ever, 5 are going to be Argentinian. So Pochettino played for Argentina's national team. He's got an Italian background, raced playing in Argentina, but then he's gone all over Europe. You know what I mean? And so I would say that that's a good thing for the U.S. because what is the U.S.? If the U.S. doesn't have a style, that's fine. You can say the U.S. don't have a style, or you can say it's eclectic. That's what it is. It's the culture. If you remember, Jurgen Klinsmann fought the border war to all the Mexican American kids that he could. He wanted them to represent the U.S. That's brilliant. And then all the kids who are born in Germany or overseas on military bases. He didn't want them to play for the country they were born in. He wanted them to play for the U.S. because they were born to U.S. military parents or whatever. So let's be honest, the U.S. is eclectic. And something we talked about style, and there's such a gray area. What's nice is when you can put your finger on something, right? Soccer is the most gray area sport on the planet. And I have a story for that in a bit later, whatever. But when you can put your finger on something, and Brazil, joga bonito. Guys, the rest of the world's trying to win, but Brazil's got to juggle with their butt cheeks and win. Come on, guys. So we talk about style, and styles are always changing. And the Bible says nothing new under the sun, right? Things stay repeating themselves. Oh, look at this. That's what they're doing. They used to do that 25 years ago. And things are cyclical and they come back, right? And so you talk about styles. What you do have is an eclectic coach coaching an eclectic country that has never had a style. Great. And I even said it. That's something said in an interview by Giancarlo Ancelotti, who's coaching Brazil now. I don't want anybody to know our style. We don't have a style. I don't want anybody to know our style. Dude, that's pretty cool. All I want is for my team to know our style. And I have another story about that in a sec. All I want is for my team to know my style. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
I think it seems like a great fit. I think I've never seen the U.S. play this well in my life. I don't mean that condescendingly. I'm blown away.
Oh yeah, I think of course not. And I think do you have U.S. citizenship? You have Canadian citizenship? Or you don't have Brazilian citizenship?
I do not.
Your younger brother does.
Thing. Yeah, we went to Brazil when I was 2.5. And actually, when we came back, I lost a year of school because I didn't speak English. I spoke Portuguese. But Tito was born there. So Tito has 3 passports. So he's right. Soon he's going to catch up to the Euros with all these passports they can carry. So no, I do not. I have Canadian and American citizenship.
Okay. So so the Paraguay game, great. The Australian game, what I thought was amazing about that is we know Australians, they are the toughest cowboys on the planet, right? And they come at each game. We may not be the most skillful, although Australia, like all teams, is getting better over the years. Yeah. They probably get good soccer programs building there. They came in thinking they were going to bully us. They couldn't bully us. We bullied back. It was a physical game. We maintained our composure for the most part, and we outplayed them skillfully, right? So those 2 things were amazing the way they were. Again,
sorry.
The criticism might be.
Good luck. Thank you. Good luck. Hello. Yeah. So at my coffee shop, and just by.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. He heard you say Klinsmann, and his eyes popped up. His ears perked up, right? Yeah.
Correct. Go ahead. Sorry. Yep.
When I was in Cyprus, there was a number of people from Northern Europe, right? Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and I saw a kid wearing a Hullet jersey. You remember that guy? What was he? Holland? Who was a player? Hullet, G-U-L-L.
Ruud Hullet.
Netherlands.
Ruud Hullet. Yeah.
Ruud Hullet, right? And so I walk by. I go, man, you got your son wearing an old school Hullet jersey, and he smiled like, oh yeah. An American actually knows who that is. But yeah, it's fun. Everybody, there's soccer fever everywhere. But so going into hindsight's 2020, I know, but going into that game against Turkey, first of all, Turkey's they're truly a top 20 team, right? As much as a team can be a top 20 in international soccer, because that's pretty subjective. But there's probably 30 top 20 teams and 10 top 5 teams. You know what I mean? For you would say. But they're a real, as Landon Donovan was saying on his pod the other day, they're a real team. And the USA is this next game, they're not playing a real team, But after that, they're definitely playing a real team. Dono was saying that. No disrespect to any of them, because they're all good players. But Turkey came in with something to play for, pride. They're a solid country with a solid soccer history, tradition, all of that. They were supposed to be the second toughest team in our group. They had just had 62 shots, or 61 or 62 shots, the most shots ever in 2 games without scoring a goal in their previous 2 games. So they were a force and they were motivated. It's easy to hate America. Every team goes into a game against the U.S. with, oh, of course we hate the U.S., right? It's just easy to hate us because they're the tallest. When you're the tallest blade in the grass, you're the first one that gets cut down and everybody hates, right? And then we go in, and I think this was the right choice, with 9 subs. So we basically gave every one of our bench players a chance to play in the World Cup and reach their dreams. And so we have a second team playing against Turkey's first team. And we essentially tie them 2-2. We play our style. We play them toe-to-toe. We don't pack it in. That was probably, in some ways, the most impressive game of the 3. Because our second team against a team like Turkey goes toe-to-toe with them. And I think that was an amazing choice, the right choice by the coach for a number of reasons. And you and I were talking about this yesterday, but one of the main reasons is he gets to see, how do these 9 players perform on the world stage? So when we get into the later rounds, I got to make a sub. I even have more confidence about who I can put where, right? And so from that perspective, brilliant. Giving, of course, our yellow card players a break, brilliant. Giving our top players a rest, brilliant, because to your point, a lot of the players are used to playing during the cool season in Europe. It's not the cool season here in the U.S., and they're going to need rest, and they're going to be running a lot. So I think it's important. And who is the last coach where the USA surprised the world by winning the world championship? What did he do differently than previous coaches? The U.S. men's hockey team, the college kids that won the tournament. If you watch the movie, he pounded fitness into those guys. Remember that? In fact, they were complaining. Everybody was complaining. He's being too hard on our players.
Well,
the movie. Yeah.
Go back to this. The Soviet Union was the big red machine, and everyone said they trained differently, and they did train differently, and they trained crazy in crazy ways. And I had an old coach from now 70 years ago named Tarasov, and they actually brought in a Canadian to start training with them. I forget his name, years ago, and then Tarasov became legendary coach of them. And one thing is, they were the intimidating Russians. They were the Soviets. They were so fit and all. And then suddenly you have these young, fit American kids who were, for us, for North Americans, it was like being in the gulag and being worked to death. They were worked to death, and they could match the Soviets. And let's be honest, they had nothing to lose, right? So there's a saying that I love: fitness isn't everything. But without it, you're nothing. And I played games before where it's like, dude, I hope I last just till halftime, because I'm dying in this stuff. I just want to last till halftime. So one thing that the U.S. has done is they've run teams into the ground at a high tempo, where teams thought maybe we're playing this heat that's 90 degrees in the U.S. or 32 degrees somewhere else, 33 degrees Celsius, 34 degrees Celsius. And the U.S. has just gone in and gone, we're going to knock you out in the first round, which has been mind-boggling. And they've gotten a goal early in every game. And so to me, that has been so impressive. The other thing is what you said. I agree. It's Americans. They're not soccer people, football people. We say soccer. That's what it used to be called about 60 years ago, everywhere in the English world, to be honest. Anyway, the Americans aren't soccer people, and Canadians aren't soccer. Let me ask you a question. Who are Americans? Who are Canadians? They're just a bunch of people from all over the world, to be honest. That is a 100% fact. They're just a bunch of people from all over the world. You know what I mean? Let me tell you what Americans do have. They have the ability of watching soccer in every corner of the world, every day, all the time. People who have YouTube. That's what the Americans are. Just people who have come here from all the countries around the world, if that makes sense. And when I say that about Americans, I say that about Canadians. Because Canadians, when I lived in Canada, Canada was more eclectic for its population. It was crazy how eclectic it was. I guess that's my word of the day, eclectic. But
I was thinking that Zico's word of the day is eclectic, and he's not talking about interior decorating.
Correct. I agree with you. There's this condescension which I've had towards the U.S. national team and Americans in soccer. And you know what? I've got news for you, man. Americans are like a version of Australians also. They're hardworking, tough fighters. When in doubt, they'll go down swinging. And you saw that in hockey in 1980. And you saw that in hockey this last year, where they will give everything they have. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's important to the fitness to get these 9 players in there, to get them their dream, but also from a strategy perspective. Now I know who I can sub in, who's ready to play prime time, most ready or whatnot. And so when you consider our second team played Turkey 2-2, we'll talk about a goal at the last second here in a minute, but that was a very impressive match. The other thing that you saw was, and I don't know if Way was having a bad day, but he got eaten alive by that right defender, whoever was defending him from Turkey. He just got eaten alive. And I've played in games where some player just had my number. And a player I played against in the past who didn't have my number, but that day he had my number, right? And maybe it was just a bad day for Way, or Way, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but Way, we definitely got he might have lost a lot of points. Which you might be thinking, I'm not sure I want to dub him in for Pulisic if Pulisic goes down or Pulisic needs a break or whatever. So that was interesting. Now, so those are all the positive things. The biggest issue, and one thing that I was reading about Mauricio, is he talks about defending aggressively, which I love. We defended aggressively in the offensive third. We have defended aggressively in the middle third. Where some of our mistakes that in the games where we have goals scored against us, particularly the one against Turkey, is we defended too aggressively in our defensive third. And this is what I mean. Attacking takes creativity, skill, certainly players working together in unison. To have a strong attack, you have to have creativity, though, on top of skill and working together. You have to have intensity, all those things. Defensively, the one thing you have to have on defense is patience and composure, strong communication, getting your shape quickly in transition. And if you're too over-aggressive when you lose the ball on the defensive third, it can backfire on you. And the goal against that first goal that Turkey scored against us, that's what happened on that goal. We lost the ball right at the top of India, the middle third, but closer to our defensive third. And we had 2 defenders dive in a bit, overcommit a bit, and that left them out of position and allowed Turkey to walk the ball in the goal. I watched it again today. And so my biggest concern for the U.S. is 2 of the goals that were scored against us were because maybe, and this is probably what happens with all goals in soccer, and to some degree, right? But our defense could not get organized quickly enough to handle the transition in the game. And I think that hopefully Mauricio sees that we look at the Paraguay game when they scored their goal, the right side of our defense was completely open. We let a guy receive the ball almost inside the frame of our goal at the top of the 18. Of course, he's going to score an easy goal because we were organized. So I think that Mauricio has a chance to address with our defense. Hey, we got to talk. We got to communicate. We got to get our shape much more quickly when we learn defense. Instead of diving in when we lose the ball in our defensive third, if you're not 100% sure you're going to dive in and be successful, back off. I've heard it said that even going in on a 70-30 ball when you're on defense is risky, right? Diving in when you're 70% sure you're going to get that ball, forget about it. If you're on the attack, if you're in the offensive third, if you have a 20% chance of poking away the ball, you can dive in as the forward. But on defense, you have to be a little more conservative. And so that's one of my concerns, is that our defense is not going to be organized enough, especially in transition, because we looked pretty good defensively when the attack was built against us, but in the transition, that's where we seem to get beat a bit. So that is one of my concerns. And then also, how are we going to fare against an Mbappe or a Harry Kane or another one of these up and coming young forwards that plays for one of those 10 top 5 teams in the world, right? Who can muscle his way and skill his way through one of our defenders. That's going to be a big question mark on defense for the U.S. And then conversely, do we have that player up front really that can, when we're not all in unison, do something special? Like Maradona said back in the day, who is going to step up and do something special to win this game in the box? And even if it's a hand of God, right? If it takes the hand for heaven. So, and then the last thing I'll say about the U.S., that goal that was scored on us in the last seconds of the game, I think was wonderful, because the worst thing that could happen to the U.S. is we think we're great. And you and I talked about this yesterday. You need to go into a game a little bit with anxiety. You need to go into a game having anxiety from beginning to end to fuel your focus and concentration. And you don't let it down until the final whistle blows. And I think they learned that lesson against Turkey, because they want to say, we really tied them 2-2. Well, you didn't, because guess what? You really messed up in that last 10 seconds. And I'm glad you did it now when it doesn't matter, because now we know what happened a couple of years against Portugal. We were up by a goal in Portugal a couple World Cups ago, and Ronaldo made this great pass and tied it in the last few minutes of the game. We thought for sure we were going to beat Portugal in that game. So U.S. has to be focused from the beginning to the end. We cannot let up at all. And I think that was it was a good thing that the U.S. had that goal scored against them in the last second. And I'll say one last thing about the U.S., and then I want to talk about this. You talk about belief, right? Germany goes into the World Cup always believing they can win the whole thing. Brazil goes into a World Cup always believing they can win the whole thing. England, somehow they probably think they should win the whole thing when they go in, and they're actually looking pretty good this year. Brazil, Argentina, those top 5, 10 teams, there are 10 teams in the top 5. Uruguay goes in, we can win the World Cup. There's so many teams that have that attitude. Just like Canada goes into the Olympics for hockey, they expect to win. U.S. expects to win. Certainly, America expects to win in the NBA, right? Or in basketball, we would play in the Olympics. Our women's team expects to win the World Championship anytime they go into a World Cup. Our men's team doesn't expect to win. We're talking about if we make it to the second round, we're good. If we make it past that, it's even better. This will be a miracle, and this will be Armageddon. Hell's going to freeze over if we win the World Championship. This is my point. If the U.S. makes it, the further the U.S. makes it into this tournament, the more our expectation is going to be going forward. And especially with the spotlight on them, the world will expect them to make it. If we were to make it to the finals, maybe make it to the quarterfinals, but certainly if we made it to the finals, if we won the World Cup, it would change the legacy of American soccer for the entire future. Every World Cup we would go into expecting to win. We would all of a sudden think we have the potential. We are one of the best in the world. And I think it would flip a switch that's been switched a few times in this country with soccer. But I think if we made it to the final 2 in the World Cup, the whole culture would change. We would expect now we're the best in the world. We just like Germany expects, we're the best in the world. Just like France, we're the best in the world. I think there's an opportunity here. And if it happened in my lifetime that we made it to the World Cup final match and won the final match, I don't know. I feel like my whole life I'd accomplish everything to accomplish for everything.
So
anyway, what are your thoughts on that, Zico?
You're trying to be level-headed, so I will be the one who pours cold water on everything, okay? Here's the funny thing. I agree with you, and I think that what you were saying about we tied Turkey is what people would say, and we tied Turkey with their second team. But the U.S. truly tied Turkey, and it finished 2-2, not 2-3, like you said, which was a good thing that it finished 2-3. You know what people actually would have said? They would have said, we played our second team and we tied Turkey, so really, we won that game. That's how people's minds work. So it's totally ridiculous. So no, you didn't even tie it, but you can make up in your head that you tied it in a 2-3 loss. But then if it would have been 2-2 tie, you would have made it up in your head that you won, right? And to me, I think people need to realize this. When the draw came out, every single American pundit said, that's the easiest, best draw the U.S. could have. So what happened? The U.S. proved it. That was the easiest, best draw the U.S. could have. So remember what your punditry was when you were calm and collected, sitting in an air-conditioned room, drinking an iced tea. Is that an Arnold Palmer or whatever? Is that it was the easiest group you could have gotten. And you proved that it was the easiest group you could have gotten. But after you beat the group that you called easy, after you win that group, don't think you're winning the World Cup. Now, the U.S.
Absolutely not. Yeah, we've got a ways to go.
Yeah, but the U.S. has been as close to 100% as just about any single team in the World Cup. What I mean is the U.S. has been hitting on all cylinders 100%. And that's impressive because in a tournament, you want form. And the U.S. has had this wonderful form. And now it's just step by step because there's such a thing as bad luck. And it really raises its head in this situation. You know what I mean? Where it's a one-off, right? If it was a series, the U.S. might have a hard time winning if it was a series of games. But when it's one game, you can win. When it's one game, you can lose. And anyway, so you're right. The U.S. is playing better than I've seen. Amazing, but it's such a long way. Like you said, if the U.S. won, they would be convinced they're the greatest. One American star would equal 6 Brazilian stars.
Yes.
And that's a good thing. It's also an ignorant, obnoxious thing, but that's a good thing. You should truly be able to convince yourself and believe it. But then you have to be able to step back and say, hold on, we actually won a group that we said was very easy. Well, that doesn't give you 6 stars. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I'll leave it at that because I know we have a lot.
Well, no, and you're right. And I look at conversely the draw that Brazil got, the draw that England got. So I paid them probably the most attention to those two for some reason, partly because I think Norway's in there or whatever. But yeah, Canada got a pretty good, nice draw. Mexico got a nice draw. I almost feel like because we were the host country, I almost feel like the draw somehow came across very favorably for Mexico, Canada, and the U.S.
If that's the case, then it seems like Argentina
I don't know
what country.
And that could be a good segue into Canada. What was that?
Yeah. I said, and then it actually seems like Argentina was the host country because they got a nice draw. Holy cow.
Oh, yeah.
They got a nice draw.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. And I want to talk a little bit about Mexico real quick. What's been impressive about Mexico is not only they 3-0, but they have a clean sheet for the whole first round. That's pretty good for a Latin America team that traditionally defense is not their favorite thing to do, right? Whereas you might expect Australia or America, hey, we're going to be tough on defense. But so it'll be interesting to see how Mexico can do in the second round too. But I think they're looking good form. What are your thoughts on Mexico? And then I want to hear you talk about Canada.
Okay, Mexico, you got to look at who they played, and none of the teams they played are offensive juggernauts. South Africa, not a great team. And we're actually talking the day after South Africa lost 1-0 to Canada and got 1 or 2 shots on goal total in the entire game. So they played them. And then they played the Czechs, and you wonder if these Slovaks in the heat died in the heat. They got obliterated, the Slovaks, even though it was an evening game, a night game, I believe. And then they beat South Korea, the worst South Korea we've seen in 25 years. And so, but the point being is they still played 4.5 hours of open soccer against national teams and not giving up a goal. The good news for Mexico, even though I think they're going to have a hard time, is now in the round of 32, they play Ecuador. Ecuador does not score goals. The thing about Ecuador, though, is they do not give up goals. And I do think that the Ecuadorians are athletically bigger, stronger, faster, what have you, than the Mexican team is. And I think in an ugly game, I don't know, I think Ecuador will probably win in an ugly game because of this. Mexico has scored goals. Okay, no problem. But they've scored goals against teams that aren't good attackers. So here's the point. If you score goals, you probably defend a bit better as a whole because you're busy scoring goals. But Mexico scores goals against teams that don't score goals. Against, like I said, Slavics probably dying in the heat, what have you. But they're going to play Ecuador. Ecuador meaning equator. These guys are used to playing in heat and everything else. And I think they're going to have a hard time scoring in Ecuador. I don't think they're going to score against Ecuador. And I think Ecuador is going to win an ugly 1-0 game. And so really bad. I'm talking about Mexico and what they did in the first round, but I'm already putting them out in the round of 32. You know what I mean? But you know what? I think that Mexicans would say they've done themselves proud. They played 3 games at home, won 3 games at home, won their group. They should be ecstatic, but they want the quinto partido is famous for them. The 5th game. They want the 5th game. Mexico's been knocked out in what would be the second round, this round of 32, now the second round. Mexico's been knocked out, I believe, 6 years in a row, 6 World Cups in a row. Could be 5, but I think 6 World Cups in a row where they haven't gotten to the quarterfinals. I know they did in 1986, but that's a gazillion World Cups ago. Do I think Mexico's going to get to the famous quinto partido, their first for 5th game? I don't. I think they're going to lose an ugly game to Ecuador, who is a defensive juggernaut also.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
But let me ask something really quick. I think it was either 2010 or 2014. I think Mexico didn't win their first second round game because I remember the U.S. not doing it, and then I was cheering for Mexico because they were CONCACAF. So I think they might have won one, maybe even two games in the second after the pool play in the last. It was either 2010 or 2014. I could be wrong about that, but I seem to remember that. Going back, before we go on to Canada, we should wrap up the United States. I know nothing about Bosnia and Herzegovina. Does anybody know anything about them? What can you tell me about them and what USA can expect going up against them?
Yeah, I can tell you very little. Not a lot of people truly can tell you a lot unless they're from that area or follow those specific players, what have you. I'd say Zico is legendary for them, great goal scorer, one of the great goal scorers in the last 20 years. But he's 40 years old or nearly 40 years old. Their star, Zico, Dzeko, so I'm probably mispronouncing it. Legendary goal scorer, but truly old. He's 39 or 40. I think maybe 40. They're going to be out athleticized. I'm just going to say that. It's going to look a lot like, I think, a better version, a more structured version of what Paraguay had, and probably a more technical version of Australia, let's say. I think the U.S. are going to push them in, but they're going to counter extremely brilliantly. If they start Zico, that's not the best counter in a way because he's, like I said, a 40-year-old goal scorer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they'll counter. The one thing,
maybe he's hold on a second, but maybe he's cherry picking a bit and they're knocking it into him and he's laying it off or something like that. But yeah,
that's it. Yeah. They'll probably eventually get pushed back to a 9-1. I mean, probably. Do they have a chance to win? Absolutely. You think when they'll win, you can win, right? You look at Paraguay. When Paraguay won their game against the Turkey, they went down in the 35th minute. I remember they took a 1-0 lead, and then they went down in the 35th minute, went down a player in the 35th minute. And for the last 55 minutes, they held off a team and won 1-0. Held off Turkey and won 1-0. I think Bosnia will be very structured, very tactical on the counter, let's say. They'll be able to counter better than Paraguay did. Let me put it that way. And I think they'll actually counter better than Australia, not as fast as Australia, with Australian strikers, but better than Australia. I think they'll be very structured, very tactical about it, but they will be forced back into their end. And the question is, can they hit on the counter? If they hit on the counter, you're in trouble, right? Because then suddenly you got to push. So that's the train we're riding later on today. If you hear it in the background, that train we're riding later on today. Hopefully it's the celebration train.
It's working great. We don't hear much background noise, so it's working.
Wonderful.
Your connection's not great, but that does a great job of cutting out the background noise.
Cool. So, no, I think the one thing you can't do is think, what's Bosnia? They can't get in behind us. They can't counter on us. You know what? Somehow they'll make counters work in a scary way. Even if they don't finish them, they'll make them work in a scary way. But the U.S. is definitely the favorites in that game. The U.S. will push Bosnia back in that game, but you better not go down 1-0. And if a team's playing on the counterattack and they take a 1-0 lead, then what do you have to do? You have to push even harder. And then what happens? They've already prepared on the counter, and it's going to be more effective even. So the big thing is that the U.S. is definitely the favorites. Bosnia will be pushed back. But if Bosnia takes a 1-0 lead, oh no. Boy, that's going to be tough. So that's what I would say about the Bosnia-U.S. game.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about Canada. What's funny is I didn't realize that the round of 32 started yesterday. I thought Canada had another pool play game. I started watching the game and I asked ChatGPT, I said, hey, what's the significance of this game? And it said, winner goes home. I was like, oh, wow. You rarely hear that. Or the loser goes home. And I was like, oh, wow, you rarely hear that in the round of pool play. No. And then I was like, holy crap, we're in the second round. And Canada was the first team to have a round of 32 game. And I'll tell you my perception, because I watched it while I was stuck in Wyoming yesterday. Canada played very well. I thought they were going to lose because they just could not put the dang ball in the goal. And I thought they were playing South Africa, right? I thought South Africa is going to get one of these counters to go in. And they almost did. But South Africa didn't look very good in that game. In general, South Africa just did not look good at all. Canada looked really good. I haven't paid much attention to them. What are your thoughts on how they're playing and how do you fancy the chances going forward.
Yeah. I think that Canada played extremely well. The bummer is, again, you know that if you're the favorite team, you got to score the first goal. You got to take the lead. You got to put the team under. And what happened with South Africa, where they could have been down 2 or 3 goals, guess what? It was nothing. And we know this. Let's talk about that gray area that soccer is. So you want to put your finger on details and whatever. Here's the big thing. When you should be down 2 or 3 goals and it's nothing, it's called hope. And one team builds hope and the other team, oh my gosh, bad luck. And so I think Canada did great at just sticking with it and getting a goal. I also thought the other thing is, okay, Canada, just get through, but you don't want to play an extra 30 minutes. If you win, of course, whatever, right? But you'd rather win in the 90 minutes, which Canada did. Because I don't think you want now getting into finishing the 4th game, going into the 5th game, and having to play 4 1/3 games, let's say, playing that extra 30 minutes would have been bad. As Canada scored at 91-02 or 91-03. Not like I was watching or anything, so I'm glad they scored. Canada scored that goal and won at 1-0. It's one of those where Canada could have made subs with a 3-goal lead, let's say, something like that, in the last 20 minutes or whatever. But they didn't finish. So more guys had to play longer, let's say, but they didn't have to play an extra 30 minutes. So that's great. They went through in the regular 90 minutes, which is what you'd like to do. You go through however you can, right? But if you can save those extra 30 minutes off your legs, that's even better, correct? I think Canada's looked great. I think they've done the same thing as the U.S. Played this extremely fast, high-pressing game. Incredible, brilliant. I think Jesse Marsh is a brilliant manager. I think he's an excellent manager. He's done a great job for the Americans, done a great job for the Canadian squad, and I'm ecstatic. And of course, Canada's lost a player with the brutal tib-fib fracture, you know what I mean? And so that's a sad thing. They've had to go a player deeper into their bench. But the tough thing for Canada, and what you said, Argentina got lucky on a draw. And in theory, the U.S. has been fortunate in their round of 32. Canada was fortunate in their round of 32. But with Canada, they're going to be playing the winner of the Netherlands and Morocco. And that's going to be brutal. I do think that Canada, Jesse Marsh is them. Remember, he's an American coaching Canadians. Canadians are hardworking people. So you've got the American aggressive ergo, which Pochettino has done brilliantly with them. And then you've got an American coaching the Canadian national team. And I think he's very, let's go, let's fight, let's get in their face. So I do think the one funny thing is I don't know that Canada will hold back against the Netherlands or Morocco. And the truth is, you think you should just be a little, I think they're going to go with that stubborn North American in your face fight. Would they be favorites against Morocco or the Netherlands? No, they would not be favorites against the Netherlands. It might be a wonderful clash of styles against Morocco. Against the Netherlands, I think Canada will start to get pinned back. But anything can happen. So congrats to Canada. Right now, Canada's the only team in the world in the round of 16. So Canada's closest to the World Cup champion than anybody.
Canadians are in first place right now in the World Cup.
Correct. Pretty cool, huh? And you're from 48 teams in the World Cup to 17, and Canada knocked out 48 to 31. Canada knocked down that 17th, and Canada can sit and watch 15 other teams get knocked out of the World Cup. So Canada's closest to the World Cup champions than anybody. Pretty funny.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, let's talk about, gosh, man, I got to pull up. What is today's schedule? Who the heck is playing today? Because it's going to be a big day.
Yeah, so it's Brazil, Japan, and then Germany and Paraguay, and then the Netherlands and Morocco.
Okay. Which one's the first game coming up today?
So Brazil and Paraguay. I'm glad we're doing this right now, because if I wasn't doing something right now, I would be sitting at home on the toilets over and over and over using sandpaper to clean up, because you just can't take anything for granted, right? And just to let you know, the history of Brazil and Japan is pretty incredible. When I played youth soccer back in Brazil in 1984, my old coach, Jarbas, I was living in Canada actually, but I had gone back to Brazil for a few months. My old coach, Jarbas, went to Japan in the early 90s to coach, in late 80s to coach. And then Zico, who I never had the nickname Zico when I was a kid, I got it in North America, and it's not just because he's god of soccer, but Zico went to Japan, and he's the number one influence on Japanese soccer outside of Japanese in Japan. And he really, and one of his comments was that he saw wonderful players who are afraid of making a mistake. And you know what people talk about pretty soccer in Brazil, joga bonito. What people talk about that is Brazilians, they weren't afraid to dummy a ball, flick the ball, juggle it over your head, nutmeg you, elastical, whatever. And that's totally different than what Brazil was. Brazil, they would go at you and they play this, where he said Japanese players were very technical and whatever, but they were terrified of making mistakes. So I would say he influenced Japan more than anybody from outside of Japan. Zico influenced Japanese soccer. And so it's really crazy. And then in 2006, Zico coached the Japanese national team in the World Cup of 2006. And so the relationship between Brazil and Japan is crazy. And I'll tell you one other thing too. The largest Japanese population outside of Japan is in Brazil. Brazil has the largest Japanese population outside of Japan. Brazilian Japanese, there's a famous move called the elastical. Some people call it the snake or the flip-flop, those things, called the elastical, which in English is just elastic with an O at the end, elastical. And Rivellino made it famous. Roberto Rivellino, great Brazilian, number 10, won the 70 World Cup with Pelé, took over the number 10 for Pelé, Rivellino. He made the elastical famous worldwide. But when he was 14, he was playing with another 14-year-old kid, youth soccer at Palmeiras, I believe, the big club Palmeiras at the time.
Who was playing? Who did you say? Because you cut out there. Who did you say?
Rivellino, the one who made the elastical famous. I think he was still with Palmeiras youth. In fact, no, I think he was with Corinthians youth because Palmeiras rejected him early on. Their loss. He was a Palmeiras fan. And Rivellino, who was a brilliant player, had a Japanese Brazilian teammate. So a Brazilian who was Japanese named Sergio Enxugo, but Enxugo being a Japanese name. So a Brazilian named Sergio Enxugo, a Japanese name. And so that was his teammate. They were 14. They were playing around, and Sergio Enxugo had this move, like that. And Rivellino said, "Hey, Sergio, what is that?" And I don't know, I just made it up. And so now Sergio Enxugo made this up. This Japanese Brazilian made the most famous Brazilian move up ever, the elastical. But since he didn't make it as a world star, he's just a really good player who made up this move. Rivellino made it as the number 10 of Brazil and won the World Cup for Brazil. But he got the move from this guy who never made it. But the guy who never made it just happened to be a Japanese Brazilian, invented the most famous Brazilian move, the most famous soccer move of all time. So a Japanese Brazilian made up the elastical, which is so famous. And hopefully we see a Brazilian do the elastical today. You could see a Japanese do it. So it's really, there's such history between Brazil and Japan.
And I'm just going to pause right there because this is what I love about, I think the great thing about interviewing you during the World Cup versus interviewing who we traditionally see on the TVs, on the television TVs, what the heck, on the television, and Landon Donovan and his podcast and all this stuff is what I love about you, Zico. Not only are you brilliant, you're a brilliant soccer player, brilliant soccer coach, but you are this historian on all these things. And my favorite thing about the World Cup has always been the contrast of the cultures, right? And seeing, like you talked about, a Japanese team, very technical, very hardworking, but afraid to make mistakes explains a lot, right? The Brazilians on the opposite end of the spectrum, the Germans, how they've always played, the English, right? It's just everything, Uruguay, Portugal, all of that. Now, the whole world's become more of a melting pot to where that's going away a bit because people are immigrating to many different countries. Canada has African Canadians on the team. Obviously, US, we've led the way, and now we got African Americans, Mexican Americans on the team, but France with French people on the team in English. And so we've seen cultures, the world become more of a melting pot, but there's still this cultural contrast in every game that you watch, I grew up in my teens, early 20s, playing a lot with Middle Easterners, Saudis, Persians, Iraqis, Palestinians. I know the passion they have and the technical aptitude that I've seen from that part of the world, and the hard working, generally speaking, the Arab parts of the world are. So I just love seeing, oh, I used to play with the Greek team. And you talk about passion, right? And of course, Mexican teams used to play with Mexican teams every once in a while. But I love seeing all that, the culture contrasts. And I really appreciate the fact that Brazil and Japan have this history together. It's fascinating. Never knew that, learned something new. And a friend of mine played for the Nigerian national team, who at the time had a Brazilian coach. And he was a different type of player than what most Nigerian players were, because in fact, I thought he was Brazilian when I met him, just because of the style of play that I had when we were in our 20s. Anyway, so yeah, that I just love that. And so where Japan may have an advantage over Brazil, correct me if I'm wrong, is Japan is going to be good at going in structured, having a style of play, having a game plan, and sticking to it. Brazil is trying to tell Prince or Jimi Hendrix, I just need you to play rhythm guitar, right? I just need you to play rhythm guitar brilliantly for 90% of the song. Then you can do your thing, right? Brazil's going to have a hard time not freelancing. Every player wants to freelance as much as they can. And so discipline, and I don't mean to downgrade Brazil, but their desire to be Hendrix on guitar versus the rhythm guitar guy, it might hinder them against Japan if they can't make that work.
Yeah, you know what? And let me talk in one sec. This is going to be a long answer, but I'm going to segue us into something else in just one sec. But
yeah,
so there's a great player. The soccer philosopher was a guy named Johan Cruyff. And Johan Cruyff made this brilliant comments, and he said, there's an advantage to every disadvantage. So I don't want to downplay it or sound cold or whatever. Like an example.
Wait, say it again, because you cut out there. Say that again. There was a what?
Johan Cruyff, and I'm mispronouncing Cruyff, but the great Dutch master, said there's an advantage to every disadvantage. And so here's an example. We know this. We rely so much on our eyesight. You could speak to somebody who has never had their eyesight, and they can smell that you haven't taken a shower 3 floors up, and they can hear you walking from 6 blocks away. You know what I mean? And so the little bit of an advantage that Brazil has, there's a big one. Don Carlo Ancelotti is a pragmatic Italian, let's say, but he actually is all about personal relationships. He manages people, not players. And so that's a good thing. Now, where Brazil is weaker than they've ever been in the last 70, 60 years since black and white TV is their outside backs. And so their outside backs, they at home as a whole, way more than back when they had Maicon, Cafu, Nelinho, Francisco Marinho, Roberto Carlos, Leonardo, Branco, Jorginho, Josemar. They had everybody, right? Cicinho. And so they're going to stay at home a lot more. And then they have an Italian manager, like I said, they will be able to play the rhythm guitar or whatever, because they're not those flamboyant players. They are the quote unquote weaker part. So they'll bring this structure somewhat in this way, because the advantage, what Cruyff said, is that our outside backs are not like they used to be. We're just not. And so there's an advantage, like Danilo, Alexandro, you guys are in your mid-30s, and you were never Roberto Carlos, and you were never Cafu. Never. Not only that, you were never those guys, and you're old. If you can't have a metamorphosis and become a brilliant Messi when you're 35. You're either Messi 5 months old, but you cannot become Messi at 35. And the good news is they know what they are.
Yeah.
And you know what? In fact, Ancelotti, Don Carlo is asking, Brazil's managers is asking a very basic guitarist to just play rhythm. He's done that. So we don't have Cafu and Roberto Carlos on the rhythm guitar now. We have basic guitarists on the rhythm guitar. So that's an advantage, if that makes sense. Dude, why are you sliding on your knees and why is your hair on fire? You know what I mean? We don't have those guys at the outside back position now, if that makes sense. And the other thing is, I think that there's this thing where a lot of countries have, but Brazil has right now. There's the thing where we're not satisfied with the managers in our own country. And so we actually have this humility that's hit us, where we have the players, but we don't have the managers in our own country. So what they do, they brought in one of the greatest, I'm just going to say this, one of the greatest 10 managers ever. They brought him in. And so many people say he's the greatest manager of all time. I hate that thing, GOAT. That's the stupidest thing that, sorry, kids say today, the GOAT. And it just happens that everyone who's the GOAT is from the last 15 years. It's like, whatever. And so, but he's in that conversation. But here's he is so absolutely admired by everybody around the world. And whoever said they wouldn't want Don Carlo as their manager is a liar. They are an LIAR, if you would say you don't want him. So the good news is Brazil is going to be, I believe, super pragmatic because we have some weaknesses. And before, like I got into an argument, and a lot of people watching this would say, here's the example. Maldini, he's the greatest left back ever, no matter what. People say, okay, great. Is he the greatest left back ever? Everyone would say yes. I'm going to disagree. I'm not saying he's not the greatest left back ever, but I'm saying this. If you have teammates in a squad in a this, and you want to attack from the back, he's not the greatest left back ever. Roberto Carlos, Francisco Marinho, those guys you can put in there. Leonardo, those guys you could put in there. But you would not put Maldini in there. You'd move him to left center back, if that makes sense. So based on the style that we need to play, he's building, again, he manages people, not players. So he realized the people that he has, the limited player that they are, but he builds relationships. And so I think that Brazil is not beautiful. They're pragmatic. And I love the fact that Ancelotti has just said it. To me, it's you're calling yourself out. When the manager goes on a walk out and says, no, our goal is to win. Where everybody else puts on Brazil, oh, you got to play beautiful. You got to this, you got to this, you got to this, you got to this. Ancelotti's actually saying, our goal is to win. And to me, for a manager to, he's not fanning the flame, but for a manager to call himself out in a way and say, our goal is to win is mind-boggling. Because it's easier to say, you know what, we want to do as well as we can. We're building for the next 4 years. I think it's pretty cool that Ancelotti just came out there and said, no, I'm just trying to win. That's what I'm trying to do. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's what they needed. And contrast that with 2014 when Brazil hosted the World Cup. They just thought they were going to go out there and out-passion everybody. Yeah. And that sailed for them. Yeah.
And there were 4 or 5, hindsight 2020, but there wasn't even hindsight then. It's common sense. There are 4 or 5 major weaknesses in the choices of players that were selected. And let me say this, the way I was going to say, let's segue into another point. I was going to say, Johan Cruyff, there's an advantage to every disadvantage. My eyesight's not there, but my hearing and smelling is better. I can stick my tongue out and know what's around, whatever, like a snake or whatever. Once you've lost your eyesight, let's say, there's an advantage to every disadvantage. The wicked, crazy game in Brazil, Japan's an interesting game, terrifying for me. The wicked, crazy game is the Netherlands and Morocco, because so many, I don't even know, I haven't looked it up. So many of the Moroccans were born or raised in the Netherlands, but they were trained in the Netherlands with PSV Eindhoven and with Ajax.
So many, were you saying that many of the Moroccans were
born and raised
in the Netherlands, which, okay, so I didn't realize.
Yeah.
That's even more fascinating. You know the history of the Moroccans. I knew that Morocco, only one of their players was born in Morocco, but I didn't realize on top of that, they're playing against the Netherlands and a good number of their players are from the Netherlands.
Yeah. And my thing is, I'm not trying to pass judgment. I hope you really, none at all. But my thing is that, so do you look back at the Netherlands and say, I want to play hard against the Netherlands because I feel Dutch also today? I'm Moroccan, but I feel Dutch also. Or do you look back with disdain and I want to kill them because, you know what, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? And so it's like, do you look back at the nation that raised you and developed you in so many ways with disdain more? Or are you looking back on, I don't want to make a fool of myself. I want to play my butt off against the Netherlands because they gave me so much and what have you, if that makes sense. So yeah, there's this big history between the two. And I look back in the, have you heard that German fans leaving, he's got his jersey on, so pretty cool. And so I look back on the 1986 World Cup was played in Mexico. Mexico is 1/3 of this World Cup, right? And they had a player named Mohamed Tamumi, most beautiful. The guy, just because the world was big back then, right? You didn't have the internet and this and that, and you didn't have YouTube and whatever. And I never got to see him play. But I saw Mohamed Tamoumi play, and I fell in love with him. I'm like, man, I want to get a Mohamed Tamoumi shirt. He wore the 10. He was left-footed. He was so smooth. He got an English player so frustrated. Ray Wilkins, legendary English player. Rest in peace, Ray, because he was a wonderful player and cool historical English guy. But he frustrated him so much that he got Ray Wilkins thrown out of the game when England and Morocco played, just 0-0 tie. That Moroccan team was so beautiful, born in Morocco and lived in Morocco, what have you. But Mohamed Tamoumi had broken his leg, and the king of Morocco had his personal physician reset and fix Mohamed Tamoumi's leg. Mohamed Tamoumi was such a beautiful player, and they had Primo Marie, Mustafa Marie, two big brothers who played up front. And they had a guy named Bouder Bala that I love. He always had this big knee brace on, but he just played with no care in the world. He'd get the ball and dribble at 2, 3, 4 guys. Beautiful to watch. They had a guy named Dolmy, Zaki Bado in goal. And so that Moroccan team was just so beautiful to watch because you never knew who they were. They just showed up on your screen and you're like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Because you didn't have the ability of watching them in 1986. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
1986 was the first time I could record games. It was Betamax or VHF. 1986 was the first time I could record games. And there were commercials, not water breaks. There were commercials. And so you would miss goals because they went to commercial. You know what I mean? So go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I watched 1986. I'll never forget, in my basement bedroom. I was a year out of high school, and I actually had a 70-inch television in my bedroom, one of those projection TVs. And not because I was rich, my parents got divorced and we moved into a new place. And the place my mom moved us into, the only room in the house that was big enough to have the TV was my basement bedroom. So I got the 70-inch television in my bedroom. It was awesome. But I'm trying to tune it in on UHF, right? Trying to tune those games in on UHF. And sometimes it was kind of grainy or whatever, but that was the first World Cup I watched. And yeah, I remember it was a pretty amazing World Cup, actually, because you had Maradona doing his heroic things there. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
And so I think that's going to be quite a wicked game today, is the Dutch against Morocco, who are so very Dutch, to be honest. And it's going to be emotional, and I don't know which emotion it's going to be, right? It's going to change between players, I'm sure. Was it bitterness looking back on where you're raised, or is it excitement and a love and what have you? You know that so many of those players would have been raised together in youth academies. A couple guys are now 28, and they started playing together when they were 8 or whatever. And one is now playing for Morocco and one is playing for the Netherlands. So that's going to be quite a game. And it's funny, my older brother, Sean, he and I predicted all 3 games today. We have a little family prediction thing going on. And he said he thought 2-1 Dutch, and I thought 2-1 Dutch too. But not without it being one wicked, sweaty, crazy game. I just think that's going to be just incredible.
Definitely, even as a player, I know when I went up against my friends, I played as hard as I ever could. Now, not cheap, not dirty, but my friends and I, when we played against one another, ended up on the opposite side of the team. We played hard against one another. We took no prisoners. Not trying to injure, but not giving up anything.
100%, 100%. In the third game in between the two, the third game today in between the two, and it seems like a lot of people would say the sleeper of the games, let's say, is Germany's playing Paraguay. And Paraguay is not this big, powerful team. Something I like about Paraguay is that they represent their country in this way. They're Guarani, and there's a mix of the old colonial, let's say, Spaniards that came in, what have you, with all the natives and all. And so they're called Guaranis, the Paraguayans. And so they're going to play against Germany. And the one thing I would say is that they played 10 against 11 against Turkey for 60, 65 minutes, and they held on to a 1-0 lead. If they can take the lead against Germany, then that's going to be exciting. I see eventually them being pushed back. But if Paraguay learned from the U.S., where the U.S. was so dominant in that game, is you got to keep your number 9. You got to keep a player up high, no matter what. Hey, listen, if you need all 11 to defend every second, you're going to lose. Can you defend with 10 and keep one up there? If you need all 11 to defend, and I think that Germany is going to pretty quickly take a stranglehold on where the ball is in the back third of
You're cutting out. Oh,
Paraguay.
no.
Oh, I hope not.
Hold
Can
on.
you see
The
me?
last 10 seconds, I couldn't hear you. Last 10 seconds. You said the last thing I heard was if you need all 11 to defend, it's not going to go
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they did against the U.S. Paraguay. They got all 11 pushed back. And if you can't defend with 10 and keep one up front, you're dead anyway. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I think the other thing is where everyone knows Germany's going to dominate the ball and possess the ball against Paraguay. I think it sounds funny to say, but I think a team that is going to dominate, if you can just raise your level of possession up, it goes from where you're going to possess in the final third and score goals to where now they're playing out till half, not overplaying. But instead of it being 75-25 possession, if you can get 40-45% possession, it's always going to push them back. You can't just dump it out, but you got to realize that the best way, do you want to defend heading balls out against the bigger team? Or would you like to defend just stringing 4 or 5 passes and getting the ball to half and knocking a through ball? Stringing 3-4 passes, knocking a through ball. You know what I mean? I think Paraguay's best chance is to defend with the ball. I think they could do it. I don't think that's what they're going to try to do, unfortunately. I don't think you can just sit back and the Germans will push them back. But for every time the Germans push you back, you got to connect 3 or 4 passes. And when in doubt, lose it behind the German defense.
Yeah.
But that's the sleeper of the team. There's
one thing I've seen
very little connection there.
But one thing I've seen happen in a couple of games is on the kickoff, teams almost like a punt in the NFL, where you're trying to punt it and get it to go out of bounds on the 1 yard line or land and be downed on within the 5, right? And within the 10 yard line in the NFL. USA did this against Turkey, and I think I saw a couple other teams do this, where they pick the ball down to try and get it to go out of bounds on the defensive 1 yard line, if you will, for the other team, so that especially if we're going to play high press, that could make sense. We're confident that we could build from the back, but why not give the other team the ball in their 6 yard box and play hard press, play high press. And I've seen some teams do that. It's the first time I think I've ever seen quality teams take that approach.
Yep.
And it's, to be fair, it's resulted in that high pressure puts the other team on their heels. And it's resulted in 3 early goals, or 2 early goals for the U.S., right? Against Paraguay and Turkey. What are your thoughts on that? I've never seen that. Yeah,
I agree. And I think it's great because mistakes happen in the first couple of minutes or the last couple of minutes when you have your warm up and you're intense and this and that, but it's still not like being kicked by somebody you don't know with a different name than yours, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think it's a great idea because the other thing is this: you put the ball within 5 yards of their corner flag. You know, something that you know about the typical throw in, it's limited to 20 yards or less. So that you know that the next pass is going to be delivered from here. So it's going to be harder to bring down. It's going to be an air ball. The next pass is going to be an air ball. And it's limited to within 20 yards, let's say. So then you can press to within 40, 45 yards, all 11 players within 40, 45 yards of the ball. You know what I mean? And your keeper can get 35, 40 yards out because it's a throw in within 5 yards of their goal line, 5 yards of their corner flags. So even your keeper can get high, and you can get 11 guys, 10 field players within 40, 45 yards of the ball, and get 6 of those within 20 yards of the ball. And then your keeper can get within 25 yards of your back line because they're not going to score from 110 or 12 yards away. Does that make sense? But you know it's going to be an air ball off a throw-in. It's going to be an air ball, and it's going to be around 20 yards to 15 yards, if that makes sense. And then you know that they haven't even gotten into the game yet. Why? You kicked it out of bounds. They haven't even touched the ball with their foot. Their first touch is going to be a throw-in from within 5 yards.
They've got no rhythm. Yeah, because usually in the game, you want to get the ball, get a little rhythm. We're going to knock it around the back. We're going to put 4 or 5 passes together, get our feet underneath, get our legs underneath us, and all of that. But instead, the first time you get the ball in the game, you've got your back to the other team's goal, right? Receiving up in the air, and you've got 11 guys ready to hammer you.
100%. Yes. And can you get that 75 seconds saying goal 1-0, and instantly you're like, God. The only good news about giving up an early goal is that you have 85 more minutes to tie it up. But you don't want to go down 1-0. Anyway, so those are the three games
no,
today,
that's great. Yeah, that'll be interesting. And I think that as much as the USA and Mexico have played really consistently, Canada had one game where they didn't play that well, if I remember right. So they were a little inconsistent in the pool play round, if I'm not mistaken. But as much as they played consistently, you've seen inconsistent play by England. People would say, oh, you've seen inconsistent play by Brazil, Germany, etc. And England. The television commentators, I told my fiance Crystal, I said, if the commentator says we'll be watching the game and I'll say something about the game. If the commentator says what I said, he's doing a brilliant job. Meaning that, but oftentimes they miss what I say. But 9 times out of 10, I'll say, oh, blah, 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 blah. And the commentator will go, oh, blah, 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 blah. And Crystal's always impressed. She's, why aren't you a television commentator for this game? I'm like, because there's 100 U.S. national team players ahead of me who are well-spoken, who could speak on television. And so I'll never get that. This is the closest I'll ever get to it. But sometimes I wish they would have this talk about like I did earlier in this conversation about, hey, we got scored against because in transition, we couldn't get our shape quick enough. Yeah, sometimes they keep it too much in layman's terms, or they just say something that's so basic.
This bugs me about everything's a generality.
And it is. And there's an opportunity to say something specific. Let's talk about the commentating for a minute. I think this will be fun. So a lot of times they won't say something specific. Though the one thing that bothers me, I get so tired of the American commentators. Usually it's not the soccer player, it's the color commentary guy who just loves saying in swinger and out swinger. And it's like back when the MLS started, the US commentator we got, he was like, hey, what can I say during the game? Because I don't know much about soccer. Tell me about the game. Somebody told him about an in swinger on the corner kick or an out swinger on the corner kick. And that stuck. And now every American commentator says in swinger and out swinger, like they are the genius soccer analysis. No no other commentator in another part of the planet says the words in swinger or out swinger as much as of course, he took a corner kick. It's either going away from the goal, it's going into the goal. That's not a brilliant note. It's something that you notice. That's not like the brilliant thing that you noticed about the game. So the American commentators, that's my biggest pet peeve is if I hear in swinger, out swinger, and then thank God, we're not hearing it's all about set pieces for the U.S., which I said earlier. That's everything I've heard about in every World Cup. It's all about set pieces because we can score, run a play. The English commentators, what I think is hilarious about them is there's a couple, I don't know their names, there's a woman and a man, they were both doing this color commentary for a game. You'd swear they think they're Shakespearean performers in the theater. They try to be so hyperbolic and so like they enjoy hearing themselves speak so much that I get annoyed by them because they use the word literally completely wrong. Like over and over again.
Hopefully,
anyway, my take on the. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hopefully, I've used the word eclectic, a collection of everything.
Yeah, that's like you. If you were color commentating today and you got stuck on the word eclectic, that would have been you. But at least it fit with the U.S. Yeah,
and it fits with most countries today, right? But it really fits with the West for sure, right? And no, I agree. And part of the problem is they have commentary, which again it stays general, too general sometimes. And I think that I got to be honest. If I was to make commentary on Jordan, I know very little about them because these are countries making the World Cup that don't have a history in the World Cup. And with 48 teams, you're going to get more blowouts because there are 6 or 8 teams that are let in that never would have gotten a sniff even. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. And you jump from 32 to 48 teams. My goodness, that's a growth of 1/3. That's 1/3 larger, right? I guess you call that a growth of 50%, actually, I think is what they call it. Yeah. So you're jumping from 32 to 48. And so there are so many countries that never would have made the World Cup, if that makes sense. So here's an example. So I'm not defending them, but I'm defending them this way. There are some countries, I wouldn't be able to speak about Cabo Verde, except they speak Portuguese, right? Cabo Verde. But so there are countries that no one even really knows one player in their team. So you got to keep it general, let's say in that way, right? But if you look at it, something that speaks to how many teams have been let into the World Cup, the 48, and needing general commentary is 9 out of 10 African teams made it out first. 5 of 6 South American teams made it out of the first round. And the one that did make it out, you would have thought would have made it out. Uruguay. It tells you that there's enough teams that were let in that the African nations have had way more success. And you would say 6 out of 6 South American teams should have gotten through, but only 5 out of 6 did. You know what I mean? And so I think that a lot of the commentary, they're not really soccer people. And then on top of that, there are little countries that it's like, dude, I didn't even know that was a country. Officially, that's a country. I thought it was like an independent state that wouldn't qualify.
Right,
Curacao, right? Curaçao's in it. Curaçao, they're in it. And I think that, so it's tough. So they get onto these couple words that, you're right, sound cool. And they hold on to these words that sound cool. Here's one that I hate. And they started saying it about 15 years ago that I noticed it. When a ball is crossed and it's too high, they'd say, I don't know if it was too tall for him. I don't know if you've heard that. Now you're going to hear it. It's, me say, look for pink Volkswagens, right? And now you're going to see every single one. They say, oh, the cross was too tall. The ball was too tall. Just say it was too high, man. It's not cool. But as soon as, so it becomes, it's that thing that, what is it? The floss. You got to do the floss. You got to say goats. You know what I mean? You got to use the word hater. So they're not really soccer people. Some of these people, again, they might be soccer people too. They speak in generalities too. Here's an example. I'm going to say this. A lot of people would disagree with me on this. The toughest game Brazil played in the first round was Morocco. 1-1 tie. Morocco was an excellent team. 1-1 tie. Igor Thiago played striker for Brazil. Brazil's midfield was so bad that on 3 or 4 occasions in 60 minutes of play, because he got subbed out with 30 minutes left, something like that. In 60 minutes of play, Igor Thiago won tackles within 2-3 steps of Brazil's 18-yard box. Brazil's center forward won tackles within 2 or 3 steps of Brazil's own defensive 18-yard box. Why? Because the midfield, Paquetá, Bruno Guimarães, who's the best of the 3, and Casemiro were beaten. So Morocco had gotten behind Brazil's 3 midfielders, and Brazil's forward got behind Brazil's 3 midfielders to fight and win tackles. And so everyone says that Igor Thiago was so bad playing at the 9. First of all, our 3 midfielders weren't getting him the ball much. And then they were getting beat so bad that he was busy tackling behind them. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then the next expert gets on and says, oh, Igor Thiago was awful. Then the next expert said, Igor Thiago. Then the next, okay, great. And then they say, Cunha, Igor Thiago's sub, was brilliant. He played against Haiti. Not that intimidating. And then he played against Scotland. They pooped their pants and gave Brazil 3 goals in the first half. They gave Brazil 3 goals in the first half. Only 2 were allowed to count. And so it's, hold on. You judge one guy by doing defensive work for his midfield because his midfield was screwed against the hardest team Brazil played. And then you judge the other guy against 2 easy teams. That's relentless. But my point is that every quote unquote commentator, I'm not even going to say expert, because Igor Thiago was awful. Igor Thiago was making tackles on his own 18-yard box because the midfield was awful. Play Igor Thiago against Haiti and see how many goals he scores. 2, maybe 3. But he scored multiple goals. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's one thing that gets me is they all wind up, I know nothing about this. But you should know something about Brazil.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think that is one thing. It was good timing. The U.S. is hosting the World Cup. The best thing that could happen in the first round to bring the Americans in is a lot of goals being scored, right? And we saw some 3, 4, 5, 6. Did we see one game had 7 goals, right? If I'm not mistaken. And why did that happen? It's because you had in the first round some high-level teams playing against some much lower-level teams, the biggest disparity we've seen in the World Cup in a long time. And the U.S. never even got beat that bad when they first got into the World Cup in 94. It's made it exciting because you had those games that opened things up. And that bodes well for that was going to make it more entertaining for Americans, certainly in that first round.
Totally. Yeah, no, US made it in 90, correct, 90. And then they
90,
hosted
that's
in
right.
94. That's it, yeah. So Germany beat Curacao 7-1. Curacao took a 1-0 lead, and Germany beat Curacao. And Canada, sure, they got the benefit of a red card against Qatar, or Qatar, as the world calls it. But
Yeah,
they beat Qatar 6-0. And Canada was a team that when they made the World Cup in 1986, they didn't score a goal, they didn't tie a game. You know what I mean? And so now
yeah,
Canada, sure, they've improved, but like we said, a lot of immigration, what have you, this and that. And so where Canada's improved, they beat Qatar 6-0. And Qatar got in the last World Cup because they hosted it. They're in this World Cup because 48 teams are allowed in the World Cup. Now, sure,
yeah.
they're the Asian champions, but they're not a good team. So we had a 7-1 game and we had a 6-0 game. And it is exciting because there's a lot of goals. But it's a game you're going into absolutely knowing the outcome, if that makes sense. And the more games like that, we see a lot of goals, but you don't want to go into games knowing that, hey, today there's 3 games. 2 of them are going to be 5-0 or 6-0 wins for this team over that team. You'd like to watch 3 games and win. Dude, I don't know, man. There's going to be a chance. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And so I think that, again, not sticking up for them, but they catch on to a couple words because one, okay, they went to school for, what do you even call it? I don't even know. They went to school for journalism. Is that what it is? They went to school for journalism. They like sports. They did sports in the U.S., probably not the college soccer team, probably the college basketball team. And then they hold on to some words. So one, they're not true soccer people, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then 2, they're not coaches. They're not former players, a lot of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't get upset with a former U.S. or Canadian national team player or the great Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Thierry Henry. I don't, Clarence Seedorf. I don't have a problem with those guys speaking in generalities about Algeria, countries that you don't really know as much about. And Algerians would be peed off because I know they had Belloumi, who is out of this world, a great player. Majer, who is out of this world, a great player. Zidane, spelled differently, Zedan. That was also 30 to 45 years ago. Not right now, if that makes sense. So I don't mind the generalities thing, but when you stay general in games, again, when people talk about Brazil and say, oh, jogo bonito, that's your made up fantasy. You know what I mean? You know what Brazil would rather do? They would rather win a World Cup than be beautiful. Now, would they love to win a beautiful World Cup? Yes. But when everybody is lowest common denominator, when everybody's like lowest common way of winning the World Cup, it's hard to hold these ideals when everybody else can have these ideals to win a World Cup. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let me give you a quick example. A player that I love, beautiful player, one of my 3 favorite European players of all time, Michel Platini, said when Brazil won the 94 World Cup in the U.S., that he traveled to Brazil as a dignitary after the 94 World Cup. He traveled to Brazil as a dignitary to congratulate Brazil on winning the World Cup with their worst team ever. About the stupidest comment you can make in this way. Fast forward to the 2010 World Cup. Spain wins the World Cup. If you look at Brazil's 1994 World Cup team, Brazil scored 11 goals in 7 games and were stifling on defense. If you look at the Spanish team that won 2010, a ton of people caught up in the moment said, it's the greatest team ever assembled. Spain, look how great Spain is. Greatest team ever assembled. Now, Brazil scored 11 goals in 7 games and had a stifling defense. Spain stifled other teams with the way they played with the ball. That was their defense, playing with the ball. Spain scored 8 goals in 7 games and were considered maybe the greatest team ever. Brazil scores 11 goals in 7 games, and it's Brazil's worst team ever put together. So do you see what I'm saying? Is people speak in generalities. Brazil should be, but then they say Spain's great. It's Spain's only World Cup. They scored 1.14 goals a game. Brazil scores 1.6 goals a game, and Brazil are evil bastards. Do you know what I mean? Or 1.7 goals a game, and Brazil's bad.
I'm sure.
Yeah, do you see what I'm saying? And so, guys, come on.
I do. Yeah,
And those
yeah,
are the
no, and
ones.
I appreciate that it's not that you're biased for Brazil, you're prejudiced for Brazil for sure. But at least you back it up with facts. Yeah.
Yeah, let me tell you
At
one
least
more.
you back it up.
Let me tell you one more. This is
Okay.
American media. Hopefully it's not in your country. So I have a sister, Anne Marie. She's Dutch. She'll be putting her back on the Dutch plane. But I've got friends. Hopefully they don't hear this. Americans talk about Dunga ball. Dunga, the former Brazilian captain, World Cup winner, god of soccer, Dunga. People don't even know Dunga and they talk. Because one person, like I've got to improve on my general statements. So a general statement is Dunga bashing, right? And so here's what happened. In the 94 World Cup, Hai was the captain of Brazil and he was the number 10, but Hai didn't fit in. So then they took the captain's armband away from him, gave it to Dunga, and Brazil dominated and won the World Cup. Now, you look at Spain 2010, and they had all these passes, and they don't know how to break it down, all these passes. But the most passes that Spain has typically had were their center backs and their right back. And so, okay, so what that means is you're not right in front of our goal. But here's the truth. Dunga ball is supposed to be really hard, really pragmatic, really ugly. Yeah, no problem. There's been 23 or 24 World Cups since minus 42 and 46, since 1930 till now, every 4 years. Correct? Here's something that happened. Dunga played in 3 World Cups. Dunga has outpassed every single player in history in the World Cup. The most that was completed by a player in a single World Cup was Brazil, was Dunga in 1984. But then American commentary would say, let's play Dunga ball. Dunga ball, he's got the most passes ever strung together in the World Cup. No, he's got the 4th most passes ever strung together in the World Cup. So Dunga, out of all the World Cups in history, has made the most passes in a single World Cup, 1994, and the 4th most passes in a single World Cup, 1998. 98. And so, do you see what I mean? So they start talking about Dunga
Yeah.
ball. No, let me tell you something about Dunga. He's the hardest, meanest, toughest packer on the planet. And he is one of the greatest passers that have stepped on the field, but people don't know that. So they'll say Dunga ball. Look, I think it's okay to be technical and be the hardest passer on the planet. All they talk hardest packer on the planet. All they talk about is, oh, he's a hard tackler. Well, give the whole story. He's completed the most passes ever in the World Cup history. Do you see what I'm saying? And so they talk about Dunga ball.
All right.
That's wrong.
No, that's interesting. I'm not even familiar with Dunga ball. I'm gonna have to look that up, man. I'm a neophyte in America growing up playing soccer here, right? Before, to your point, YouTube, before even cable, right? To some degree, and certainly before streaming. I'm thinking, I don't know if you want to do this tomorrow morning. It might be more succinct to talk about today's games. Maybe we do this again tomorrow morning is 8 a.m. Talk about today's games and preview the games tomorrow. The cool thing about that is we'll be able to do it, I think, within an hour because we'll have this down. It'll be more succinct. We're going to get a lot of short clips today. I think it'll be fun to share with people. But yeah, so let's plan on doing it. Maybe every day there's games this week. The next morning, let's do that. 8 a.m. I know you're on vacation, but hey, have a cup of coffee. Maybe it's coffee and soccer with Danny and Zico. Maybe we'll call it that. And you go ride that train. You guys have a fun time.
It's also called Caboose Coffee. So that's where I'll be. And it's phenomenal. If you're ever in this area, it's fantastic. Best coffee guy I know. Cool. Tomorrow morning.
See if you can leverage that into a free cup of coffee tomorrow with a little bit. Yeah, at least with with our pod. We're promoting you on our pod. Can I get a free cup of coffee?
Correct.
That would be good. All right, buddy. Love you. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. And let's plan on talking tomorrow. Enjoy watching the games today. I've got a ton of work I got to do today and tomorrow. So I'm going to be watching those games, but that means I'm going to be working tonight and to make up for watching the games. Yeah, for sure.
You've got a ton of hour work to do while I am on vacation. You've got a ton of hour work to do. So have fun.
I do. I got to do some Kick-It 3v3 soccer work, and then I got to do some. I got Kick-It 3v3 soccer work to do, and then I do digital marketing consulting. I got a couple of big projects I'm working on which are exciting. But thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Honestly, I don't know of a podcast out there right now that gives the historical and cultural context that Zico brings when he starts talking about these upcoming matches. I really don't know of anything out there like that. And it's one thing I love about the World Cup. That's one thing I love about Zico is it's something we can tap into over this week. I think you'll find exciting. Tune back in, like us, share us, podcast, wherever you're watching us, like us, subscribe to us, download us, enjoy it. What's
And
up?
pray for
What if you're inclined? Some prayer for Brazil would be wonderful. I'm a big Brazil fan. My daughter got married in Rio de Janeiro back in 2022. Spent like 12 days in Brazil, and I've always loved the style of play. I've always coached and played more like aspired to coach and play more like a Brazilian than any other country, really. All right. Cheers, brother. Love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah,
Enjoy your vacation. Enjoy the train ride. All right. Cheers.
Bye, Danny.
Mm-hmm.